Sorry.
Good morning and welcome once again to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. Joining me today are my co-host, Bess Goden of Millennial Splaining, and Christina Khalil, who is running for Senate in New Jersey. Bess, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
Christina?
I'm good. No complaints at all. I'm very happy to be back. Thank you so much for the invitation. I just want to make an announcement. We have been working on signatures. So if anybody's interested in volunteering to work on petitions, feel free to reach out at khalilforsenate.com.
Yes,
that's definitely something that is necessary. We need to get people on the ballot if they're going to run.
That's right.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be for Congress. Even if it's smaller offices or local elections, you could still reach out. The goal is unity and to replace all the corrupted people with new ethical politicians, candidates, and elected officials.
And you know, I don't hold a lot of faith in changing things via elections, but we definitely need people running, if only to show that the system can't just magically be reformed the way that the Democrats keep telling us. Because remember, the Democrats have been promising reform now for a very long time. And there hasn't been much actual reform since the 1960s.
No, there hasn't. And they even had the office. I want to remind people they had full control of the House, Senate, and everything from 2020 to 2022. And they decided not to do a single thing.
Pretty much.
That's right.
I will say they did the American Rescue Plan. Most of the good stuff in that has already expired.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the Inflation Reduction Act, which had some good things in it, but the people who are experts on the environment, and by the people who are experts on the environment, I am including people who were running around in 2020 saying you absolutely have to vote for Biden to say because of climate change, say that the Inflation Reduction Act, with all its supposed good stuff, all that good stuff was completely undone by giving Joe Manchin a pipeline.
Yeah.
And what's the point of putting a bunch of elements from the Green New Deal into a bill if that same bill is selling fossil fuel leases and building a pipeline through a place poor people live?
Yep, 100%. And let's not forget the climate damage that's happening over in Congo and Palestine. How many years is that going to take to clean up? And why are we investing our money into destroying the environment there?
Well, for Congo, since you asked, lithium comes from Congo.
Yep.
Uranium comes from West Africa. I don't know if there's any in Congo. The big uranium source is Niger.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing that we don't remember. Africa is full of countries that should be rich.
Yeah.
By the standard of the fact that they have lots of valuable stuff that other countries want.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, those countries are kept poor so that stuff can be stolen. So I'm glad you mentioned Congo. Especially since, and most people don't really understand this, the people doing the genocide in Congo now are the people who were put in power to stop the genocide in Rwanda. Mm-hmm. And Rwanda is now doing genocide in Congo as a proxy for U.S. billionaires.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Welcome back.
Sorry, what? What did you say? Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and it's just I forgot. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Bess.
I don't want to ruin everything. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're perfect. We were speaking about Congo, and who's benefiting from that the most when they're going in and they're engaging in these genocides and they're taking these. Hey, Renee.
And my other co-host is in the chat. Yeah. Good morning, Renee.
Hey, Renee. Welcome.
And they're taking all these materials and they're selling them, but they're buying them and taking it for dirt cheap, bringing it over here, and then marking it up with 200-300%. So we have to pay enormous amount of money for it. And those countries that are mining it and collecting it, they're not even getting any of the benefits, which is the most heartbreaking part of it.
No, they're having to deal with the destruction of their environment and the death of their people in order for the US to keep having a supply of resources.
Yeah, and that's just madness.
And what you've got now is people up in arms and angry at China because China's offering countries a better deal for their resources than the US. And it's like, what? You're mad because China's not exploiting them as much as you are?
Yeah.
It's all very. It's like nothing has actually changed since the 19th century.
No, nothing has. And I'm going off topic because it was interesting earlier, and I was like looking up, old movies and games and stuff like that. And because I saw Bess's message about wanting to speak on next quickly, and there was a moment in time where gender was never a political issue, where people could, on TV or in video games or books and movies, that there was what's the word? When people put on a show, they dress up with the big wigs, the guys dress up with the big wigs and all the makeup.
Drag queens?
Yes. Where that was okay. Gender was a non-conforming standard. So, like, for example, in Final Fantasy VII, the old game, there was a scene where the main character got dressed up in a dress, and Final Fantasy VII is a very old game.
Yeah.
And the guy was saying gender's a non-conforming structure, so it's okay that you're wearing a dress and makeup, essentially. It's all about what you feel comfortable in. So, and then down the road, it's like, at what point did they decide to make this such a huge political issue? Because people were able to live somewhat normal lives, but it was more accepting, because I don't remember that ever being a big deal.
Well, the thing you have to remember is that it's always been a big deal to some people.
No,
but there was this.
Let me answer that real quick. As a member of the LGBT community myself, and having been reared by people who are now drag queens, there has never been a moment in time in modern history, especially in this country, where it's been okay to be non-gender conforming. There has never been a time when it has been generally accepted. Now, there was a time during Obama when, he put through gay marriage, and there was a lot of people that were positive about it, and there was sort of a wave of acceptance. I will absolutely say that, and that the pendulum has swung backwards since MAGA. I certainly agree with that assessment. So if that's what you were trying to say, Christina, I definitely agree with that. And especially focused towards trans and non-binary, because the last time we had this conversation, we had it again pre-Obama. We had it about the gays, right? Mm-hmm. We had it about LGBTQ people, and then that became an older conversation. But the points that were the talking points that were used by the right at the time have been brought forward in time, and now are being applied to non-gender conforming and trans people.
It's
very, Yeah, it's very it's very similar what is happening. You can sort of draw parallels. You could even say that Next Benedict, what just and just for a moment, let me just clarify what happened. Next Benedict was, I believe, 16 in high school, non-binary. They went to the bathroom. There was a bunch of girls in there that were had a history of bullying them, and they got into a fight and then beat the crap out of Nex. Nex ended up in the hospital that day, filed a police report, and then the next day died. Preliminary autopsy says that trauma was not the direct cause of death. So we're still waiting to hear exactly the details of the situation. But considering that Nex went into the hospital right after it happened and then died the next day, I have to assume it's related.
That's a
Yeah,
pretty
that,
serious.
what else would
Yeah.
cause it?
So yeah, let me just finish real quick.
Yeah.
So the parallel I'm drawing here is the very famous case of the guy's name that I now forget.
Matthew Chapman.
Matthew Chapman?
The guy in Wyoming.
Tied to a fence post.
Yep, that's the one.
Is his last name Chapman?
Believe so. Let me double check.
I think it's Matt something else. But that is the case I was going to bring up, because this is again exactly the same situation. Only this time the perpetrators were women, which is an interesting diversion, but it also shows that there are people on all sides of the spectrum that are enforcing a gender binary, and through violence.
Matthew Shepard. Sorry,
Shepard.
Matthew Shepard.
Thinking Matthew Lillard, but that's the guy.
Yeah.
Matthew Lillard played Shaggy in Scooby Doo.
Yes.
He certainly did. That's not him at all. Matthew Shepard. Thank you so much.
Matthew Shepard.
Shepard, yes. So I believe that Next Benedict is the Matthew Shepard of this generation, and I think that it definitely heralds a new wave of anti-LGBTQ hatred. A new wave against non-binary and trans people, for sure.
And that's really sad.
Yeah. And again, it's partially because the gender theory is not widely understood. It's not something we've had too much public conversation about until very recently, but it is something that people who are certainly my generation, and probably Xers as well, have been having privately. As the LGBT community, we've been having these conversations amongst ourselves. So to a lot of us, and those of us who are allies and friends like you guys, like it feels like we're in this bubble of acceptance, right? Like it feels like of course, like gender should be something that you're comfortable with, and that you should be able to just say, I am, two spirits, I am non-binary, and it shouldn't be a freaking issue. But, on so many other places in the world, it's just not the case. And people just don't understand it. They just, look at it like it's witchcraft, right? So there hasn't been as much of a media movement as there was throughout the 90s and into the 2000s about gayness, right? There hasn't been that for transgender non-binary people yet. It's like coming, it's like starting, but people are really struggling to understand it.
They've made some attempts, but the attempts could have been the best example I can think of in media is when Supergirl was on the air. They brought in they brought in a trans actress to play a trans superhero. And it was well done. Actress was good. They did a good job of working who she was into the story without making it explicitly preachy or anything like that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, she was a clearly passing actress who you wouldn't know was trans unless somebody said something.
Mhm.
And so it was really easy for a lot of people to not think about it if the episode wasn't talking about it.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that it's wrong to pass or anything like that. It's just if you're trying to familiarize people with something, our tendency to go with the most acceptable person we can find to bother people the least sometimes actually defeats the purpose of normalizing something in the minds of the people who you're trying
Right.
to reach.
That's a very good point. And I think that look at the body of like gay media that was put out around the 90s and early 2000s, it was quite a bit. I mean, you have like not only the Ellen stuff, but you have oh my gosh, what's uh Grace, what's that
Will and
show?
Grace. Oh,
Will and
that's a horrible
that
show.
gained us a lot for a lot of people, that show. um
But it's so bad, and the gay main character is so heteronormative.
don't even, how dare you, sir?
The only funny person on Will and Grace was Megan Mullally. The guy who played Jack was funny when he was working off Megan Mullally, but was just obnoxious working off everyone else. And Will and Grace were just obnoxious.
Well, fine. I'm going to debate that, but like you can't know how much of a part of a personality of my personality.
I totally can. I get it. I preferred Queer as Folk. That's all I'm going to say.
I know 100%. So I grew up watching Queer as Folk. Like I watched it in high school as I was dealing with my, sexuality. I loved that show. And it breaks my heart that it ended, to be honest. But I was obsessed with that show, to be honest.
And it also ended at a time when most people were really feeling optimistic about everything. It ended on a really downbeat note with two of the main characters moving to Canada to get away from the homophobic city government of Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I mean,
it was very realistic about things. They had a story arc about police violence after one of the characters got beat up by a cop.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's the thing. That's what I'm trying to describe on a larger level here, is that we had Will and Grace and we had Queer as Folk. Right now, with the non-binary and trans community, we only have maybe like 15% of the media, you know what I'm saying, that deals with these things. Actually, one show that is really great, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, it's called The Owl House. It's a cartoon on the Disney Channel, Disney Plus, and it very much encourages it very much encourages acceptance of the LGBT community from a younger age, which is really refreshing. They sort of bring it in as part of the story without it being a thing. It's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? It's really great. And the main character comes out as bi during the show and dates a woman. And there is also a non-binary character they refer to as they them the whole time. So, I mean, it's starting to happen. Like you can really see it. And that show is about love and friendship and acceptance. I mean, it's a Disney show. It's really sweet. It's a great show.
But I also, sorry to cut you off, I also want to
Yeah.
highlight, like, there's currently like even more lies, more misinformation about the community. My biggest one is, and this is new for me to hear, it's like people, the schools are transitioning the kids. I have never heard that before until maybe a few years ago. And these are all policy choices too, because no one in the administration is challenging these lies and saying that no one can, like, by law, and I'm saying schools cannot transition kids. I don't know how a doctor, a therapist, or anyone is going to lose their license, risk jail time, and say, like, okay, I'm going to transition this kid without parental consent, without parental involvement.
Well, this is where the lie comes in, and I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm also brought this up too. I just
because this one lie like drives me crazy every time I hear it.
When Republicans are talking about parental consent, they are saying parents should have the right to tell their kids who they are, when often it's the parents who are the ones abusing the kid and preventing them from being who they want to be in the first place. The people who are talking about parental consent are people like Elon Musk, whose trans kid hates him.
I think all his kids hate him.
Boy.
And it's really important to understand that requiring parental consent for things like abortion and gender affirming care is a way to give an abusive father more power over his kids.
Yeah.
It's when they talk about, oh, my kid came home traumatized because school taught her white people are bad. No, school taught her real history, and now you're having a hard time making your kid racist.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on this topic too, because this is, I know that I mentioned Owl House, right?
Yes.
Is definitely something that somebody could point to and say, this is making our kids trans or gay or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, because this is a show that normalizes those things and it introduces them to kids in a way that is accepting and it doesn't talk down to you. You know what I mean? So, but I want to point out that just by presenting the child with the possibility of this being the case doesn't mean that we're actively recruiting or grooming your children to become these things. Like, that's what's happening in schools. What's happening in schools is an acceptance of kids not, being completely sure of who they are yet. That is what the teachers are trying to do. They're trying to encourage the kids to explore who they are, and they're trying to encourage the kids to be open and honest about that, and not have to worry about repercussions. That's what's on in the schools. There's no pressure to become anything. This is kids experimenting with who they want to be,
and in theory, kids learning who. Sorry, you go first.
Okay, it's appropriate within the developmental stages of teenagers and young adults to explore and find their identities. So that all goes to normalness, and it's important that schools are the accepting place, because if it's not schools that are accepting, you are leading that child into the arms of predators, because they're going to go online and they're going to find acceptance and the information by any means necessary. So that's where it's like, why not have school as the accepting and the safe place for everybody? Because I'd rather my kid go to school. If I was an abusive father, I'd rather my kid go to school. Okay, whatever, I don't agree with my child, blah, 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 I'm angry. But then at least if something happens, the school's going to notify me, versus I don't know what's happening. They got all these apps and all these ways for kids to hide information from their parents. And that's another thing that's on the rise too. So, and why would I say I'd rather my kid be on the internet or on the internet with their friend? Because you can say I have blockers on the phone and stuff like that, but their friend doesn't have blockers on the phone, and now they're both looking up stuff. And it's just what I've heard kids get into these days, and working and speaking with parents right now, I'd rather school be the safe environment. And it only makes sense, but nobody's transitioning your child in school.
Yeah. And, on that subject, people learn about sexuality through the internet.
Yes.
That's something that started, I think, with our generation, Christina, right?
I'm going to be blunt.
What's that?
I'm going to be blunt.
Yeah.
Either kids will learn about sex in a sex education class, or kids will learn about sex from porn when they don't get sex ed.
Yeah.
And when your kids learn about sex from porn, that may not be the best way for the kids to learn. Yeah. It may be wonderfully entertaining for adults, but that's different.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, actually, because it's, discovering my sexuality, right, as pansexual, was a journey for me. And part of that journey was understanding lesbianism through porn, because I didn't have access to actual lesbians yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's part of what's going on here also. And it actually really affected our generation to the point where sex was so normalized that we thought we were supposed to have it, to the point where we have women these days coming out and saying, like, I probably wouldn't have had sex if it wasn't so normalized and I didn't feel social pressure to do it, and the ways that we have sex and the ways that we talk about it are in terms of porn in these days. Like, it's like the expectations, not just like physical expectations, about what a woman looks like. I mean, obviously there are those, and that's been there forever, but there are expectations of what a woman can or should do during sex that are just that are definitely porn based. Like that, like, do you like, I don't know how vivid you want me to get, Chris. I mean, you want me to stop? But I have very specific questions on, like, dating apps. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you squirt? Okay. Like, that's not something you should ask me before we go out. Right? So this changes the way that we have a sexual relationship with each other. It's very, not great.
and I'm not anti-porn. I don't want to trash porn. I just want to point out that, I mean, that's where that traditionally, historically, when parents in schools have not educated the kids, that's where the kids have gone to educate themselves.
And it's also like the sex workers, they're actors and actresses. It's all about fantasies and creating stories out of it. And when people are raised on it, they're not able to understand what the reality of it versus the fantasy of it. And many people are chasing the fantasy, the unrealistic expectations of sex versus the reality of sex. And and it's not just our generation. Gen Z, that's the generation after millennials, right?
Yes.
Okay. They're the ones that got hit the hardest. I'm now starting to see young adults that were literally raised on porn. And their entire perception of just reality in general is just so warped. And then their parents just said, just watch a screen, leave me alone. And the parents would go off, do whatever they wanted to do. They never monitored their kids. So now I'm getting a whole new version of people that I'm seeing and working with on a daily in my practice. But at the same time, it's like I'm talking to other professionals and we're like, we've never seen this. And now we're all trying to discuss, and we're doing new research and new stuff to try and say, okay, how do we combat this? Because we know the administration has no interest in actually preventing these issues from happening.
I mean, the good news is we know the answer. Teach sex ed.
Yes, that. But my job on the outside is I can't focus because I'm not in office, so I can't even focus in school. So how do I educate the families, and how do I educate the individual when now I'm seeing them at a very bad point in their life, and they're just like, what do you mean everything I watched is a lie, and this is how my brain operates, and this is what I think is normal. And I met one person who that we were working with. I had to get some other professionals involved because I just didn't know what to do. And the individual opened my eyes. The person had to start taking opiates to actually stop their erection because they couldn't stop having sex because Pornhub really warped their mind and they were raised on that. Wow. And then I'm just like, okay, now I'm dealing with two different, now it's like not just an opiate addiction that got out of hand. There's other substances in there too, but it's this person does not think they could be sober and ever have a healthy sex life. And how do we combat that? And then also we have the new wave of, and I'm sure the industry's been like this for forever, but with all the inflation stuff like that happening, we have an entire new wave of unethical sex work where people are pushed in a corner and they feel like the only way to make money or to pay their bills or to stay in a house is being forced to engage in sex work. So how do we get it more to ethical versus people feeling like they have no choice?
Well, we need to do something about the economic dread that everybody fears, and the fact that the bills are so high. The rent's too high. The bills are too high. People need help. Those prices need to come down. Capitalism is the problem.
Yeah. And then how do we also protect, like, we have two new areas. One is AI sex work, where it's a whole new wave, and no one in the administration is talking about it, where they actually put like minor and little girl faces on the bodies of these adult women.
AI.
Yeah.
AI is just an ethical quagmire that steals from everyone, Yeah,
but it's like now we have individuals coming forward saying, I know this isn't me, but my face is on this body and I feel like a victim. I feel violated. So where's the laws for that? Because that is technically a new violation. They never consented to this.
Yeah.
And then how do we also help people that have revenge porn or get secretly recorded and then their videos and their information's online? So how do we hold these corporations accountable and say, okay, you have to take this off. This clearly the victim came forward, said it was unconsenting. So how does the administration, because at the end of the day, these are all policy choices that just create victims.
Let's remember that the administration and Congress just ignore stuff as much as possible or pass laws to ban it.
Play golf.
And don't really think about the actual real inputs and outputs of what's happening. The best example I can think of is every now and then you have tech billionaires come to Congress so that Congress can try to make points trashing them. But the problem is that nobody in Congress knows anything about tech. Yep. So they end up looking really stupid, and the tech billionaires end up looking really good because nobody in Congress knows anything about tech. And they're making ridiculous points about things that aren't true instead of addressing the actual problems in tech. One of the biggest things is everything AI does steals from someone.
Yep.
There's no discussion of, when people talk about the ethics of AI, they talk about, well, what's ethical as far as they talk about this complicated, is that we need to be ethical so we don't have a computer that takes over the world and kills us all. But we're less worried right now about the computer that takes over the world and kills us all than the computer that replaces artists by putting out bad art and replaces writers by putting out bullshit articles that aren't even true, but looks good enough for some website to put it up as content.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Before we get too deep into a different subject, do you mind if I just tie a bow on what we were talking about with trans representation and porn?
Please.
Oh my gosh, see, we run off a lot. we just gotta rewind.
So, I think that, you know, the people who really believe that LGBTQ people should not exist, the people who really honestly believe that, see us as subhuman, okay? Because of a lack of representation, the kids that are growing up now have to turn to porn to understand what it is that they are interested in becoming, right? So the one of the biggest problems with that is that porn is meant to appeal to somebody's darkest desires, which means that people who generally believe that LGBTQ and trans people are, you know, immoral and should not exist. Some of y'all have deep dark desires that you go to porn for. Some of y'all have deep dark desires that you write porn for. And this is the framework that we are viewing these things in. It is a Christian dominated male supremacy issue.
Yeah, I 100%
So
agree.
I wanted to make that point, and I also wanted to say, you know, that I definitely believe that the next wave of feminism, you know, it's not only intersectionality as far as race goes, but it is also intersectionality with the LGBTQ community, because, you know, we are, as feminists, we should be taking down the patriarchy. And the patriarchy is an institution. It is not men. It is not the existence of people who have penises. It is a institution where men are supreme, and that keeps everybody else. White men are supreme, especially in this country, right? White Christian men are supreme in this country. And this is who we are interested in equality with, let me put it that way. Okay, we're interested in no longer being on the bottom of this hierarchy. So that, and you know, that's something that the new left really needs to start, you know, picking up from, you know, the progressive and liberals, and sort of reclaiming from, you know, like sort of the corporate takeover of some of this language, or whatever is being said these days. Like this is the focus of the left going forward, I believe. So anyway, so that's I didn't want to get too off topic, but
No, and a good book to talk about what you were talking about, because it's not just men in the patriarchy, that I encourage a lot of people to read, because I read that and it opened my eyes to a whole new world. It's called The Female Chauvinist Pig, and it's by Ariel Levy. And I read that in college. And it just talks about, you know, the women and the rise of the raunch culture in 2005, and it critiques highly sexualized American culture in which women are objectified, how women objectify one another, and how women are encouraged to objectify themselves.
well, my point is exactly that, though.
Yeah.
Is that it's not you know, men are not the only people who uphold the patriarchy. Women also uphold the patriarchy by being a part of it. Okay, by being a part of that system, by fulfilling their expectations of being a subsidiary in certain ways, right? So that is why feminism is not about men against women. That's why it's not about any gender against any gender. It's about everyone against an institution of patriarchy that was set up in this country that is predominantly white, cis het Christian. And this is, you know, that is a very specific thing that only involves some people that are really about it. You know what I'm saying? So it's not, you know,
I think that book talks about everything you're speaking about, and it goes into such great detail and gives good examples. So I don't want to spoil the book, because I really want everyone to like read it. And this is a very old book, so I don't think it's going to be expensive anymore. But it literally hits the nail on the hammer with, nail on the head, whatever the phrase is, with everything that you're speaking about. Because the author doesn't blame women. She
Yeah.
challenges the entire patriarchy.
Right.
She breaks it down layer by layer. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I'm definitely going to check that book out. And I, I definitely want to reinforce also that it's similar with whiteness, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we all have whiteness. I don't your heritage is different from us, Christina, as an Egyptian. But you are passing, I think. And we, but we are trying to be anti-racist, all of us. We are actively
Mm-hmm.
trying to build an equal society. Um, Therefore, I mean, so people often say like, um, well then, like, just because I have white skin doesn't mean I'm a white supremacist and stuff like that. I mean, well, no. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we are in a system of white supremacy, and I have white privilege because the system sees me as white. But
Mm-hmm.
I, as a person, can be anti-racist,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what we're asking you to do, sort of relating it back to feminism and the patriarchy. That's what we're asking you to do. We're not asking you to change who you are, not one iota. Please be yourself. If you're a mother, if you're a homemaker and you raise children and you love it, then do that. We need you in this country. There's nothing wrong with that. And that has nothing to do with the patriarchy as a whole. How your relationship,
Mm-hmm.
your financial relationship with your husband or with whoever your mate is or with your own, financial status, that can be something that works against the patriarchy, right? That's something that, if you have your own business or if you, you are independently wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there aren't really a lot of options, but there are ways to be, anti patriarchal in any position in life. So I want to say that because I don't want people to feel attacked when I'm saying these words, when I'm saying the word patriarchy, when I'm saying white supremacy. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want you to feel like I'm calling you out. I'm not talking to you. I'm not saying, hey, whitey. I'm not, hey, saying,
Sorry.
hey, dude with a dick. You know what I'm saying? Like, I I am not talking to you specifically. We have to be able to have these conversations and speak about them as a system, as
Yeah.
it fits into our society and as it influences everyone, because you can't escape far enough into the woods to get away from society. I don't care how off the grid you are. You cannot escape far enough into the woods to be not at all affected by any of these things. You just
Yeah.
can't.
And I just want to say also, when it comes to women that want to be stay-at-home moms and raise their kid, the goal is to also provide them with more benefits. So it's like, you want to stay at home, maybe you get a monthly stipend from the federal government, so that way you have your own income. And how could we help you with the system? How can the administration help you, be
It's
Absolutely.
thriving at home?
the fact that the fact that no that whether it's done by men or women, domestic labor goes completely unpaid is
Yeah.
something that needs to be considered when we're talking about the traditional family. Because let's
Absolutely.
remember, the average person cannot afford to be a stay-at-home parent, even if they have a traditional spouse and family structure these
Yeah.
days. Both parents have to work to pay the rent and the bills.
Yeah.
There's that capitalism again.
Yep, absolutely. Because we are based on an agrarian system where we are supposedly all living on a farmstead, right? We all have a house that has a farm, and all of our children are workers, and our husband goes out in the field every day, and then we as wives, we stay in the kitchen and do all like that. That is the presumption, right?
Yep.
But since the industrial revolution, that is becoming not a reality for so many people on a dailier basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we need to really change our perception of the family and how that relates to our finances, because this is yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. You're right.
And
And oh, when I was going to say that, yes, men do stay home and take care of the kids too.
Yeah.
And gay couples have one of them staying home taking care of the kids. So
Yep.
everyone should have access to that benefit as well. And I definitely believe that it is a prime example of how this is the patriarchy and not men. Because this is the
Mhm.
patriarchy in that everybody expects someone to stay home and take care of the kids, expects the laundry to be done, expects the shopping to be done.
Mhm.
Asked Tucker Carlson in his utter confusion on using the quarter system for keeping their carts in order in Russia.
Oh my God, we have that here.
I
and it's
mean,
a bad thing.
that is that is that is a that again. So that is the patriarchy.
Oh,
Because most of us do understand this kind of
Well,
labor.
you have to remember with Tucker Carlson, there's an extra layer in there, which is that he comes from a class where they have servants.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the lesson of intersectionality is that we can, and I'm not speaking about this from a very super duper duperty educated place. Like, if there's somebody that wants to be like, well, Crenshaw said this, and I'm, like, come at me because I deserve it. So, but I do want to say that that I think the spirit of intersectionality is oh crap! I lost my train of thought. What was you right before I said that? What was
You were saying you were going to say something about intersectionality. We have been talking about Tucker Carlson being of the class that has servants, and that adds another layer to his confusion.
Yes.
right? Thank you. I'm so sorry. So the reason I bring intersectionality into this because intersectionality, it comes with class, right? Class is
Yeah.
actually a really important level here, that the reason that we cannot define class without saying race, without saying gender, without saying the patriarchy, is because these are all aspects of each other, right? So I think that's the point that I wanted to make there, that when we're talking about the patriarchy, we are also talking about class. We are also talking about, the men that largely the men that are on top and largely
Mhm.
everyone else that aren't. So, I wanted to point that out as well. That's what it was. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, but that's and I'm going to go ahead and since we haven't actually talked about the political parties very much yet, I'm going to go ahead and sort of stake out the positions they claim to take on these issues, which is you can see the Republicans slavering to hate everyone
Mm-hmm.
and passing terrible laws like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida.
Yeah.
And let me make a point that while you do not see the same degree of anti-gay propaganda in the mainstream media that you used to, all this anti-trans propaganda is part of an escalation so they can get back to trashing gay people in mainstream media.
Yeah.
Because Ron DeSantis used drag shows and trans people as part of a general attack on all queerness, not just trans people. It's a Don't Say Gay bill, not just a Don't Say Trans bill. They're going after everyone.
Yep.
They're just using trans people as the bloody shirt to wave to justify it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And it's definitely because it feels newer to the public at large, the topic of trans.
It's also because there are fewer trans people, so there's less well organized resistance in the same with the same volume.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, but
also the majority of trans people are poorer than the gay liberation movement of the 80s and 90s, which ended up being run by well-off white men.
Always is.
Yeah.
But my point was that the reason they're coming after trans people and not necessarily, lesbians or another letter out of that group is because they feel newer to the public zeitgeist. We haven't been talking about trans people for that long, really at all. Really at all. We've been talking about gay people for a lot longer. I think we went over that before anyway, but I
And
just
they're
bring it.
taking advantage of the fact that there is that people may not have built up the comfort level that
Yes.
they have about other things. They want to make you uncomfortable. They want to tell you that it's bad that you're uncomfortable.
And
And
then
then they want to blame the person that they used to make you uncomfortable instead of blame themselves.
And then this goes down to, they're also cutting funding for not just education, but for mental health, because usually what happens is, and insurance companies are also forcing therapists to end contracts with them because they're only paying them. It used to be $150 an hour or $100 an hour per session, but some insurance companies are like, we only think you're worth $20 an hour. And they're like, I can't keep the lights on with $20 an hour as a kickback from the insurance company in my practice. So then it also reduces the number. But when people usually feel uncomfortable, they usually will go to a therapist to have that conversation, or they'll go to a support group to have that conversation, or they'll go to someone within the community to have that conversation. But now they're cutting community resources, mental health, and so many external resources where a person could be like, okay, I feel stupid asking my family this, but I want to have a conversation and figure it out. I don't want to be judged. This seems like a safe place to have a conversation, but now we're reducing the resources and the outlets. So that's only feeding the hate, because it's much easier to find groups and support and people that cater to the biases and negative stigma that currently goes on, than it is to find people that are very well educated and versed within the topic, because a person can't afford a $200 an hour session.
But then, and just to dial back to where I started, while the Republicans are openly pushing hate, the Democrats make a sort of formal speech about how hate is bad, but then want to compromise with the haters on policy.
Yeah.
And you hear people like Hillary Clinton say, well, maybe there is an issue going on, and maybe the Republicans have a point about trans people and abortion. And it's like, Hillary, this is not what we need right now.
Yeah.
Oh my
God.
God.
And you know what? That goes into not just my field. Doctors, lawyers, surgeons, a whole bunch of other professionals have to continue to do, it's called continuing education, where we have to earn enough credits every year in order to stay in our field. And we have to be up to date with current issues and events going on. And it also challenges old ways of practices, where it's like, oh, they could come out and say, oh, the way you're doing this is completely wrong. How we first taught you was wrong, but now here's the right way to do it. So why aren't we having people in office engaged in continuing education? Because why? That's my big question. If I have to do continuing education, or a doctor does, in order to stay on top of everything and the current issues and getting rid of old practices, why aren't they? It's like time's frozen for them. They're all capsules, and they think that it's 1940 when we're in 2024 right now.
That's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. And it's sad that we're even having to have that conversation about competency tests.
Yes. I'll be pushing for that policy when in office, guys.
I love that. But going back to what you were saying, Chris, I completely agree with you. And I definitely think that there is some level of like kayfabe going on.
Yes. And for those who don't know, kayfabe is the term used to describe the scripted parts of professional wrestling.
Exactly. Like this is the opposition that is set up between Democrats and Republicans is often a lot of talk and generally never any action whatsoever. Frickin' ever.
So
we have had a very similar administration under Biden that we did to Trump. to be
Joe
honest.
Biden has made a political career out of trying to make Republicans happy.
Oh, yes.
We are always running to the right. We are always trying to seek out support from the right. And you see it in the Democratic Party, and you can see it on the left. You can see it on the left with a lot of people who have transitioned from the Bernie left, quote unquote, to now the independent Alex Jones, God help me, right.
Well, and yeah, I was talking about this on Twitter with another podcaster about how things like COVID and here in the US and in other places and Brexit in the UK were used to reach out to specific portions of the left and pull them over to the right. And now some of these people are supporting just the worst anti-gay and anti-black and anti-trans policies while claiming to still be progressive.
Yeah. And let's not get it twisted, because there were active campaigns to go after certain groups, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
To go after feminists. There are active campaigns to go after Black Christians, whatever. They target groups and they start building your narrative. And over time, it works.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, like, why can't the left do that? And, why is it always the right and we're running to the right? The right is where the money is, you guys. The right.
Exactly. The donors are all reactionaries.
Yes. The right is where the money is. The right is where the people who have been in power from the beginning of, like, European dominance. Okay. Yeah. That's who we're talking about. These are their descendants. Okay. That's the what we're fighting here. So I think it's important to keep that in perspective.
And then also, my one friend, he always says, in order to beat Trump, you have to pass progressive policies. And that goes into the lefts that went to the right. I think majority of them just bounce to the right because they're just like, at least I know what I'm getting with this. And everyone that I supported lied to me and let me down. So it's out of anger that they've jumped to the right, and out of abandonment that they've jumped to the right. And now they're and feelings of being let down. So in order to get them back to the left, you have to, like, not us, because we're not in charge. The administration has to pass progressive policies.
There are certain outlets, people who have large followings and are taken seriously among rank and file people who consider themselves left, who really the only thing left about them is that they dislike Democrats, but they spend all their time attacking Democrats. They don't actually advocate for third parties or for revolutionary socialism.
Yeah, that's my other pet peeve.
They just talk about how, oh, well, Trump is better than the Democrats. We need Trump back.
Yeah, I would like to make a comment on this too, if you don't mind. Yeah. Again, bringing up kayfabe, because it's a very interesting thing. I've been looking into it because honestly, I'm curious. Because these are people that I were friends with, that I thought I followed, that 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden I woke up from a back surgery, and here I am in this wasteland where everyone hates each other and everyone hates.
Woke up from a back surgery. It's a new world.
So I've been trying to figure out what's been going on. Okay. Yeah. So basically, I look at it this way, that there are people who were sort of in the Bernie movement that were very much against big corporations, and I think that united a lot of people, because we are also talking about when we're talking about the difference between the Dems and the Republicans, we're actually talking about the difference between two subsects of billionaires. Right, we're talking about
corporate parties that represent different corporations.
Exactly.
Some of them represent the same ones. Depends on the candidate.
Sometimes, yes, that's true too.
Gas and oil versus big tech, essentially, is the
big. Well, I mean, that's actually a better way to look at it. Is traditionally the financial capital people, the people who invest in stuff, have been pro-Democrat. Whereas the chamber, so Wall Street is the Democrats, and the Chamber of Commerce, the people who feel like they actually do things, but actually they just take money from the financial capitalists and then pay people to do things for them. They don't actually do things themselves. But so the Chamber of Commerce has traditionally been the Republican side.
Yep.
And the Chamber of Commerce people see themselves as the put upon middle class, and Wall Street and the Wall Street financial capitalists they get their money from as an abusive elite that's keeping them down.
Yeah.
And that's why under Trump, under Obama too, but especially under Trump, this focus was on keeping interest rates down and on keeping money freely available so that the people who do things could get money from the financial capitalists without having to pay too much back to the financial capitalists, which of course makes the financial capitalists unhappy because they're not getting their cut. So a lot of
they're getting a cut, but not a large amount that they want.
Not the cut they think they should get.
Yes.
And so you have the people who hire the workers, and the people who hire the workers borrow money from, fighting over the cut, and nobody's interested in helping the workers because the Democratic Party is the party of Wall Street and the Republican Party is the party of the Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a little more complicated than that. There are people who are financial capitalists first who are Republicans, and people who are Chamber of Commerce capitalists who do things first and who are Democrats. But generally speaking, the Democrats represent the financial interests while the Republicans represent the actual business owners and business managers.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the things, the guy in Florida, what's his name? Ron DeSantis. Yeah. He got a lot of people on the left. When he started, he went to a subclass of people in the country that said, I don't know about forgiving student loans, but I'll reinstate the bankruptcy policy for student loans. Yeah. And everyone struggling with student loans just jumped on the DeSantis train right there and then. Not everyone, because I'm like, no, forgive it.
Well, if that really happened, he would have had better results in primaries against Trump and might still be running for president.
Well, but then
I know what you mean.
But it's also like, even if it's like, what are the primaries really like, and how much of it is real? Because Bernie beat Biden in a landslide, if you ask me. But then
traditionally, the Republican Party is pretty honest about its primaries, at least up until 2020, when Trump took control of the primary system to basically freeze out anybody who might run against him.
Yeah.
Whereas the Democratic Party has always put its foot on the scales to balance the people, to give the people they want to win an unfair advantage and make it very difficult for them to lose. Yeah. Traditionally speaking, when people talk about how the Republicans are better than the Democrats, it's generally, well, the Republicans listen to their voters, and if enough of us become Republican voters, they would listen to us too. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it works. Joining the Republican Party to change it from inside doesn't work any better than joining the Democratic Party to change it from inside, because they're both the same party. They're just two different faces.
That's right.
It's like but what I'm saying is like how to explain how left people are jumping to the right.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, oh, I hear you. And Ron DeSantis, do I think because he's the one that scares, he's always been the scariest one, because he says I'm going to do something, he actually follows through with it. Yeah. So he has the receipts. And so if he spoke on it saying, when he did speak on it, I'll reinstate and make sure that bankruptcy is reinstated for people with student loans, bankruptcy rights, that I remember seeing on Twitter, he's going to do it. His receipt says he's going to do it. He always follows through on whatever he says. He needs to gain the supporters. I remember reading on Twitter, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, it's that easy because you have people saying, now candidates running saying, I hear the pain in the left, whether they care or not. They're like, I'm going to get the votes because all I have to do is acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Whether I fall through with it or on it or not, they're just going to be like, okay. So that's why it's so important for people to support progressive candidates. And, as a third party, I'm going to be biased, with third parties, support Green Party, guys.
Yeah.
But in order to break this duopoly of lies and anger and hatred and what's right in this country, we have to pass progressive policies. That's what's going to get people on the left back. Mm-hmm. Because now the left is labeled as not our left, because we're very far left. I feel like we're in the common sense left. Yeah, now it's like the Democrats are labeled as anti-Medicare for all, anti-student loan forgiveness, anti-COVID protection, anti-education, anti a whole bunch of things. And people are like, if that's the left, I don't want anything to do with it.
Right. That's not the left.
No, we're on the common sense left, but this is what the current administration, because Biden ran on all these lies.
I pronounce them not the left.
Yeah. But he says, and then we got people in the media saying he's progressive, and he's not progressive.
For a while,
yeah,
they seem to have finally stopped for the most part, but for a while there was the big media thing in 2021 and 2022. Biden's the most progressive president since FDR.
Yeah, and then you also have
not that many Americans know who FDR is in the context that the media is portraying Biden. So they might believe it and they don't know that who FDR is. So they're like, well, okay, that sounds interesting. But Biden is rolling things back. He's destroying the Sonora Desert in Arizona to build Trump's wall.
Yeah.
They've been chopping down 100-year-old saguaros and leaving them to rot.
That's horrible. And the climate disaster that it's going to impact. But then we also have the fraud squad. They're supposed to be very left. They set all these platforms, but when was it Matt Gaetz that challenged the House? I can't remember who challenged the House, and everyone said the squad should have been doing what the person who kicked the House Speaker out.
Yeah, I think it was.
Well, the squad should have been doing that with Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, they said they should have been doing that with Nancy.
The Democratic Party doesn't work that way. The Democratic Party is very controlled, and you have to be a good person and know your place and do what you're supposed to do to rise in the ranks. And that means you have to let yourself be co-opted.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do your 40 hours of telemarketing for the DCCC as a freshman, you don't get any committee assignments. You become irrelevant, and you can't raise any money to run for re-election.
Yep. And that's where a lot of people are just angry because now you have me and we have each other where we're like, no, we're the real left. We're trying to get people back on our side. But when I go out and I speak with voters, a lot of them are like, well, I already supported Bernie, but how do I know you're not going to pull a Bernie? Or how do I know you're not going to do what the squad does? Or how do I know this or that? Because, I've been lied to by the progressives before. It's like, oh, I'm Green Party. That's why I left the Dems to actually run as a real progressive. And then sometimes they're just like, okay. And sometimes they're just like, I'm too burned that I have no spirit to fight left. So it's rebuilding what the progressive Dems and the squad and Biden has destroyed, and Bernie Sanders too.
That's a good point. Well said. And I think that there's a reason. I think that there's a reason for it because the way that Trump and MAGA sort of over the right is the way that progressives failed to take over the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Right.
And that's what people
we have to see these things. We have to see these things as factions, and we have to see that the people within the Democratic Party and the people within the Republican Party before those two things happened, were
Mhm.
part of a neutral ground that was established between, you know, essentially during like the Clinton dynasty. Okay, that's like the Bush and Clinton dynasty. We'll put it that way, the two warring dynasties. So that was sort of a comfort level that used to be there, and that's where they were at. And then we had a new faction with MAGA supporters and on the right, and they came and took over. And and progressives completely failed to do that.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. And I think there's a reason for that. And it goes back to what we were saying about kayfabe and about, you know, warring billionaires supporting these two parties, is that it's really like you can see that there are, you know, there are people there are people in the Republican Party who are billionaires, and they're all different billionaire factions, right? And the billionaire faction that, you know, was, you know, originally came up with MAGA, you know, the roots of that. You know, again, this is not one person, this is many, this is a whole process that I don't know the details of, to be honest. But that we are talking about people with money fighting other people with money within. Okay, so on the left, in the Democrats, we are talking about people who have money and people who do not have money. Okay, that is the difference here. That we are fighting for the people who do not have money, and therefore we have money ourselves, and that
and we are the majority.
the least amount of voice and power, right, within a capitalist system. So I want to at least point that out, because for two reasons. Firstly, understand that if you are a right and a person on the right who is populist and thinks that they are, you know, following class solidarity and all of this line that's been going out there a lot, just know that you are part of a movement that was created by another faction of billionaires, my friend. And you yourself are not necessarily the lowest class, because when you guys say class solidarity, you mean middle class solidarity.
Well, and this is dangerous. Somebody in the chat. Let me scroll back up now.
I can't.
The doorknob dependent podcast clique. Now, if you're not a Twitter person, then I don't want to go too much into detail, but Jimmy Dore is someone with a fairly big following on the so-called left of the internet.
Oh, is that where the doorknob comes in?
Yes, that's what doorknob comes from. Jimmy Dore.
Hey, Jared.
Jimmy Dore, back during, shortly after the 2020 election, was pushing what he called force the vote, with the idea that, yeah, we should make the progressives try to force a vote in Congress to if Nancy Pelosi really wants to be speaker. She needs their support. They should stand up to her, which was good. But at the high point of this campaign, this is also when the Boogaloo Boys were a big thing, and they were giving speeches after the presidential election, saying that they wanted to, quote unquote, work with other working class people to do something better than our system, and trying to sound progressive and open-minded and worker oriented. So Jimmy Dore had a member of the Boogaloo Boys named Magnus Panvidya on his show to say all these ridiculous things about bottom unity from someone who's an upper middle class kid who's never really had to actually work, while Jimmy Dore drools and says he's a worker.
Yeah.
And a guy from the World Socialist website who was on to talk about labor issues is asked about this by Jimmy Dore, and he's, you know, the Boogaloo Boys are fascists and you should watch out. But a whole bunch of the Jimmy Dore fans started having Magnus on their show.
So here's what it is. you've got to understand that in this country, when I'm talking about white supremacy and a network of white supremacy, I'm talking about literally people whose grandparents were in the KKK, and they've been passed down like this, this, community of racism, essentially, right?
Yes.
Still living within a community of racism, and whatever they call themselves now, Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, all of them, they're different factions of people who are essentially as extreme as the KKK. Okay, that's where the root is. And these people spend almost all of their time, and I know this from studying neo-Nazis, okay? They spend almost all of their time sitting around thinking about ways that they can sort of sneak in the side door to
Yes.
they think they can convert. Okay? And that's what happens. That's what happens to when we see conversations like that. When we
That's what happened to the Movement for a People's Party. It became a right-wing organization, and its founder is working for Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s presidential campaign.
Yes, he is. Absolutely. And so, again, we're seeing how money talks, because that's exactly what it is. You can be, you can be, if you are within this system, you are being torn between billionaire interests.
Now,
that's one point.
Eugene says, in fairness, there was a time when Boogaloo positioned themselves as allies of BLM. Yes, but in fairness, they were lying. And anybody who was actually in the field at protest during 2020 knew they were lying. And people who were calling them out for lying were ignored.
Yes. And I believe Magnus was lying as well.
Magnus tried to say that he was part of a group here in Portland that was doing security for Black Lives Matter. No, the Boogaloo in Portland were shooting people and blaming protesters.
You have to listen also to the phrasing, right? We were doing security for BLM protests doesn't necessarily mean security for the protestors.
No, it doesn't.
No? And and again, when we're talking about Rittenhouse, right, and the 3 or 4 day long protest that happened there, and those circumstances, you had an internet wide call for people to come across state lines bearing arms to protect property against protesters.
Oh,
these are the kind of things that we are seeing, and when I'm saying that these are like that these people had grandparents in the KKK, that's what I'm talking about. The KKK is essentially just a posse of people with guns that are willing to go out there and crowd control Black people to death. Right?
And these are lawyers and judges and politicians still today. These are people also in power.
The Heritage Foundation is essentially a Nazi organization, and people don't say that enough.
Absolutely.
And this is the organization that chooses judges for the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and the Democrats want to respond to an actual Nazi organization choosing judges for the Republicans with, we don't believe that the judges should be political.
Yeah. But when you and that's the thing, when you have judges like
it's a political appointment. How can it not be political?
But you also have to make sure that there's no biases, and there needs to be a clause that if there's any bias or racism or unfair treatment, a judge needs to be removed immediately.
Well, bias is a word that you have to be careful about, because everybody has some kind of bias. The problem is we have this.
The thing is this. I'm sorry that the norm. What we have to understand, I'm not, going around calling everybody in this country a Nazi. I'm not going around calling every cop a Nazi. I'm not saying every Republican's a Nazi. Whatever you heard when you just got upset just for a minute ago, I didn't say that. Relax. What I'm saying, is that there are systems in place. There are pockets of Nazis within the cops. There are pockets of Nazis within the military. These people exist in positions of
Oh,
power, right? Because we
it's
come
not even
from
just
a
pockets of
society.
Nazis in the
Wait a minute.
cop.
Let me just finish my sentence. I'm so sorry, Chris. We come from a society where white supremacy is normal, where male supremacy is normal, where Christian supremacy is normal. Okay.
Yes,
So the fact that they are normal in our institutions should not surprise you. And that's
exactly.
my point. Go ahead, please. I'm
No,
sorry.
but it's people always you saw this in the news when they during the again a lot of it was during 2019 and 2020, but I mean, and they've dropped off it a lot. But you used to see in the news all the time stories about the cops believe they're being excuse me, the cops believe they're being infiltrated by white supremacists. It's like, no, the cops are a Nazi organization.
The cops literally were invented to corral slaves that escape slaves, right?
So here's the simplest way to look at it. And this is the reason this is in my head is because you've got white supremacists who will jump into arguments about slavery with the Irish had it worse. The Irish were slaves in America too. And first, no, they weren't.
No, they were indentured servants.
And second, there was a big difference between indentured servitude and slavery. Not early on, but the not early on part that they don't talk to us about, it was actually a little better for slaves. It wasn't worse for indentured servants. It was a little better for slaves. What happened was you had Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia when Virginia was still run by the Virginia Company. Now, this is important to understand. Virginia started as a for-profit venture that was owned by a corporation and whose corporate board was the government of the Virginia colony. So Bacon's Rebellion was a rebellion against the governor and, to an even more important degree, the Virginia Company, that was led by one of the aristocratic types, a guy named Nathaniel Bacon, but whose followers and supporters were nearly all poor white and black people, slaves and indigenous servants. At the time, slaves and indigenous and indentured servants and indigenous prisoners were all sort of communally mistreated together in a system that led them to see each other as fellow working people. Mm-hmm. Bacon's Rebellion failed. The company militia burned Jamestown, which was then the capital of Virginia, and chased the rebels out and reestablished themselves in power. And then they did two things. First, they instituted they made the slaves live in their own segregated communities on the edges of the plantations. Mm-hmm. They instituted a pass system if slaves wanted to leave the plantation to do anything, and they put the white indigenous servants in charge of checking their passes. And that's why the Irish are cops in America.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and I want to just highlight on the biases. Yes, everyone has biases, but when it comes to public work, we have to be able to remove our biases. And if, like for me, I always have a supervisor if a bias or a countertransference issue comes up where it's like, okay, where is this coming from? Why do you feel this way? Is the person really annoying, or like, is there something underlining happening? And then we have to challenge each other constantly in the field to make sure we're our best in removing all personal emotion and all personal feelings and thoughts, so we can give the best service and the best help to the individual that needs help. So like but now we're looking at a judge. If a judge has biases and reacts emotionally on their negative beliefs of an individual, that's not going to help anyone. And now you're abusing your power because of your own ignorance. So if a judge abuses their power their ignorance and creates laws or creates a punishment within a court system. No, you need to have training, and if you're refusing your training, you need to be removed if you're not going to be better. Like, you can't have like for me, if I was somebody that had problems with people with blonde hair, and I kept picking on people with blonde hair, and I kept telling people with blonde hair, like, it was your fault, and blah, 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 I wasn't being effective, I would essentially get fired from my job, and this person would be compensated. And, there would be probably a legal issue into it, because it's like, you can't hate me because I have blonde hair.
That's actually why I'm self-employed, is because I can't deal with people with blonde hair. I'm kidding. No, that's an excellent point that you make, and I really hope that there are other public service institutions, such as the police, such as literally, anyone in service of the public, that tries to check themselves on bias the way that you do in mental health. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and I think it's
great. Not even just that, because it's not just mental health. There are times where I have to go in and, like, when we're working with a client, or we get ordered to the court, or we have to go speak with prosecutors and stuff like that, and we see real biases or racism happening. It's like, do you know how I can say it naturally now, but do you know how exhausting it is to say, you're presenting to have some biases with this individual that we're talking about? Why would you say that? It's like, people are like, oh my God, that's taboo. How dare you say that out loud? But like in my field, we have to call it out constantly to make sure that the person gets the right help. But no one does it, because it's just like how they definitely don't do it. But we need more people like that. And the way it starts, it's like, it's not just from the bottom. That has to start from federally. These are federal judges in office. And if they're not acting right, there needs to be a clause to say, like, you have to go for continuing education, you have to go for training, and if you're not going to do that, you have to be removed. At least, like, put a process through.
Absolutely.
Because it's regular people like you and me, and it's my neighbors that get hurt at the end of the day.
I tend to think that we need to focus less on the idea of being unbiased and more on having the right biases. People should want to help people who are being hurt. People should want to protect the working class from the landlord and the boss. People should want to protect racialized people from and queer people from Nazis. There were all these things where, instead of somehow being magically neutral, which is impossible, we should be trying to build a system with the right biases and not the wrong biases.
Well, yeah, it is. I just want to say, it is hard, and it takes a lot of training. Like, I've been in my field for almost 10 years now. And, there are times where biases come up. And one group, and maybe I shouldn't. So there is one group, it's police officers, that I have the worst biases with, where I'll catch myself saying, did you really get punched in the face by accident, or did you say something to, like, where I was just like, you can't ask that question because he's a victim in front of you, Christina. He did get punched in the face, and I got to go to my supervisor. So it's like, it's like I catch myself, and it's like, okay, one of my challenges is I do work with people, with officers too, because it's also, and through that route in mental health, they also opened up an entire door for me, where I was just like, wow, through the top, we really create this division in the system, where it's the federal government, it's the Congress, it's the local state government, where it's like, they continue to create these toxic police departments and these toxic individuals. And then, but they're all policy choices at the end of the day. It's the officers pulled the trigger and created another hashtag and another protest, but it's the politicians that allowed the officer to have that power to pull that trigger. It's the politician's responsibility that the person passed away. And that's how I view it, because it's the death of everyone. The politicians allow this to go on for so many years. It is their fault, not just the individual officer.
They're the ones who are responsible for administrating the system. They are the people who exist in order to be blamed. So they should be willing to take responsibility and blame, and they're not. They want to blame voters for everything. They want to tell people that you have to vote for me because it's going to be so much worse if you don't vote for me. You're fighting for democracy by voting for me, but if I lose, I'm just going to hand things over to the guy I say is a fascist.
Well, like they're doing now, and they didn't even lose yet. They're still handing everything over.
Well,
Biden invited Trump to help with the border policy. What?
Yeah.
I thought we were fighting against this guy.
The thing that frustrates me to no end.
Last week, because you told me that Trump would be elected.
Yeah.
Trump is going to get elected. Trump is going to get elected because they've already abdicated any sort of promise to do anything to make things better. They're trying now to talk about, well, we're gonna enshrine Roe in law. It's like, that's what Barack Obama said.
Yeah,
he had a chance and didn't do it. You had a chance and didn't do it. It's unless you magically take Congress back now, you're not going to do it. And if you do magically take Congress back, you're going to forget your promise because you don't actually want to make some of your constituents vote to legalize abortion.
And speaking on that, and this is why I'm really pushing for third party and Green Party right now in support, because if we could get the votes, the goal is to have Green Party win in local offices as well. But presidential wise, that's a very long shot. And I do understand that. But giving Green Party the votes and voting for your belief and what you believe in, if we hit that 5% threshold, that opens up federal funding, to my knowledge, to help build the party infrastructure. So now you have money building the infrastructure of ethical candidates, and your hands and your voice will be involved in how this party is created. So the people, because we're going to need people to run, we're going to vet everybody that runs, but it's the poor people that are going to be able to be uplifted through this vote.
And I just want to add one other talking point too, that and I heard this from somebody who was a guest on Renee's show on Black Power Media, and I friggin' forget his name. So if Renee, if you're in the chat, please help me out. But he said that if you vote third party, they keep records of that, and then they will change their policies going forward to capture voters, right? And that's how you literally push Democrats left.
And that's a good point too.
That's one of the I mean, keep in mind that during the period where FDR was passing the New Deal, there was an American Socialist Party there was a Socialist Party of America that was saying the New Deal didn't go far enough.
Yeah. And then I also want to say, like last week, I was a guest on a podcast, and I actually shared the link so people can hear it, where somebody was like, well, I know Biden's a danger, but Trump's a real danger. So like your vote would be a protest vote. And it's just like, I'm not telling people how to vote, but why am I going to vote for either party that's going to essentially cause me a headache? Why am I going to vote for cop cities? Why am I going to vote against immigration? Why am I going to vote for mass incarceration? Why am I going to vote for people that are increasing suicide? Why would I waste my vote to say I don't care?
If both parties support cop city and a militarized border with a wall, what are my real choices? If one party says that Israel is good and genociding the Palestinians is right, and the other party says Aaron Bushnell is mentally ill for setting himself on fire in protest of genocide, how am I supposed to decide?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes, So I encourage everyone to listen to that link.
I just wanted to ask you what show it was.
It's the link I
Saturdays with
sent you in the
Renee.
DM.
Wait, say that.
The
Christina?
link I sent you, Bess, in the DM.
Yeah, what you could just say the show's name.
Oh, grown folks. I feel like it's more in there. It's grown folks talking something.
Oh, okay. All right, then hold on. I will send it.
Yeah, grown folks something. I feel like it's something after that, but essentially, it's I wasn't budging, and with the audience, I didn't care if that offended people at the end of the day, because I'm tired. We don't like having another hashtag, having a protest. There's so many protests happening every day. It's so hard to keep up.
Yeah.
And now I'm getting messages, Christina, go here, Christina, go there. And I'm just like, it's so hard to say, it's like, I'm trying to, and I catch myself having to explain, like, I'm at work, guys. Like, I'm not a millionaire. Like, I live paycheck to paycheck. I'm not a rich person in any way, shape, or form. I can't just like stop work and do this. Like, I have to get my paychecks. I have to pay my bills. I have to do this. I have to do that. So it's just like, and it seems like people are very understanding, but I'm not backing down no matter what, back to the grown folks talking, that one, but I'm not saying there's a lesser evil, because they're both evil. Why am I going to cast a vote to say I'm going to vote and support someone that goes against everything that I'm fighting for? I might as well drop out the race, return all the donations, and stop everything. If I cast that vote, I might as well never go to another protest, never say ceasefire again, never say no more hashtags, never say anything again if I don't actually follow through with my beliefs on principle.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I agree. And if we're going to go with lesser evil voting, there's only one presidential campaign wearing N95 masks while campaigning for signatures right now. And so the lesser evil is the Socialist Equality Party, if you care about COVID.
And they also, before I kick off, and speaking about COVID, what do they say? They said on the Disability Day, no more COVID protections.
No more COVID, no more isolation. The CDC killed the COVID isolation guideline on the day when disabled people mourn the folks who have been murdered by their caretakers.
Yes. And I just want to say, wow, I lost my train of thought. Give me a second. With COVID, okay, federal, now the CDC killed it for regular working people, the isolation of 5 days, but federally, and some states will still actually have the 5-day paid quarantine.
Oh, that's good to know.
Interesting.
And that does not use their personal time. Now, that's for certain states that will pass it, and federal jobs will pass it. So keep that in mind. They're saying they'll protect them, but they're not going to protect the actual people.
Of course.
Yes.
That's just so gross. Don't protect the actual people, because we need them to make lunch for us.
Yeah, and we want your vote, but it's okay if you're
from my lunch to me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I definitely want to get talking about Aaron Bushnell.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Run too long if you guys are into it.
Yeah, I want to wrap up soon, so this is the best time. Go for it.
Well, I'll just quickly say, Aaron was not mentally ill or had struggled with. I hate saying mentally ill, but that's what everyone keeps saying online. He did not have mental health issues. Everything was forced on him, and he was pushed into a corner. And the reason this was a detailed planned out. He was very self-aware. And not only that, he also made sure nobody was hurt. He made sure the public was protected. There was no innocent bystanders. And he had a very strong message. So that was a display of protest.
Yes, absolutely. He also sent the footage to media outlets.
Yeah.
He also secured his will with a friend a few days before he did this.
There's also, for people who do not understand it, self-immolation also has a very important place in Buddhist spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
The point of self-immolation is not to die to make your point, though that is generally how it ends up. But the point of self-immolation is to suffer as much as the people you are advocating for are suffering, and to speak the truth while suffering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Basically, you're saying, I don't care how much you torture me, I'm still going to speak the truth. And you're doing to yourself something that no one who might want to torture you for the state can copy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
he also gave I didn't watch the video, but I read the play-by-play. He also gave a very detailed warning and said, I'm about to commit an extreme act.
Yes.
He's a huge trigger warning to people.
Yes.
He made people aware. And I just want to highlight, did anyone ever find out the officer that pulled the gun? And
they all did. All the cops in the video had their guns out, if you watch.
No, the main one, did anyone find out their identities and what department they work for? Because that's not okay. And people were screaming, I don't need a gun, I need a fire extinguisher.
Well, and that's really the thing. How can you even call it suicide when the cops could have saved him with a fire extinguisher at any time, but sat there with their guns trained on him while he died instead?
Yeah.
Is Aaron a horse with a bad leg? Did you have to shoot him on the trail so you had horse meat for the rest of the fucking Oregon Trail? What the fuck are you thinking, sir? Seriously, that is unreal.
Yeah, that was just a ridiculous display of how useless our cops are. Mm-hmm. They reach for the gun and not the fire extinguisher in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. So going back to what you were saying about the Buddhist tradition of self-immolation, and I appreciate you brought that to the table, because it's clear that Aaron, must have known that. He yelled free Palestine until the end. I mean, it wasn't like, I'm burning,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, he knew what he was doing. He planned this.
I could be wrong, but my assumption is that he is Buddhist, or that he has studied the Buddhist concept of protest.
It's possible that he studied it. So I looked a little into his story. Apparently, when he was young, he grew up in a
very right-wing Christian family. I know his mother was saying, "Yeah, he's a whack job," in very disparaging ways.
The type of parent he is.
All right, I'm sorry, guys. It was a cult. Let me pull up the actual name of it, because I can't.
And then while you're pulling it up, I just want to highlight how everyone in the media is talking about, mental health issues and soldiers and veterans. Okay, why don't you also advocate and people pass policies to provide better mental health care and resources and outlets for soldiers and veterans, instead of knocking down the one individual?
This is a good question, and I will give you the answer, which is predictable, sadly, in our society. The VA actually has very good services available, but accessing those services can be very difficult, especially if you live in a rural or suburban area without immediate access to a VA facility.
Yep. And why don't we talk about creating policies to make sure everyone has access to?
And if we had a universal system modeled on the VA that everyone could easily access, and which had facilities everywhere, that would make a huge difference. But then it would also make a huge difference if our communities still had their hospitals and they didn't get torn down to build office buildings or hotels or parking.
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to point something out with insurance companies. Not every facility, when I'm not talking about hospitals, like doctor offices or even mental health professionals, not every facility actually takes veteran or the insurance that soldiers have. So because of the limitations, again, of the access to VA and stuff like that, a lot of these people are forced to pay out of pocket, or sometimes we can call and get a single case agreement to say, like, you know, hey, we want to be able to give them, you know, the treatment here. Can we get a percentage back to at least help them? But the insurance will oftentimes say no if it's going to be a long thing. So if they have the opportunity, it's the best care, but majority of them do not have that opportunity.
And let's go back again and just go back to the beginning. Like you said, this is not a mental illness issue. Yeah. This is a rational, premeditated, deeply thought out, and extremely sane act committed by someone who really could not take it anymore and was that committed to social justice that he believed he could not continue going on being complicit in a genocide.
Yeah.
And I say complicit because he was getting ready to be assigned to the Middle East. And several stories have broken recently in the past few days that, number one, we have American troops in the Middle East doing targeting for the IDF bombings. And number two, we have American personnel in the field doing sniper stuff alongside the IDF. So America is killing people in Gaza too. America is complicit.
Yeah, and I do want to give credit to the sergeants that are out there now, because some of them are actually out there and they're talking about it, that they are giving their soldiers and reminding the soldiers they have every right to deny certain assignments.
Yes.
And it's important that we support and encourage all the soldiers. And granted, there is a lot of pettiness and retaliation in the military because not everyone has supportive sergeants or so.
That's right.
So if a person does say no to an assignment, they could get dishonorably discharged. They could get abused. They can get attacked depending if they're overseas, because my biggest issue with the military is it's all internal investigations. So if something happens, the families don't get closure, or the story, a person just says they committed suicide, book closed, you're a civilian, you don't have any right to access any more information. So people are just blinded by people have no power as civilians. Well, civilians don't have power over the military, but soldiers don't have a lot of power as well. So,
well, the military is deliberately undemocratic when it comes to the soldiers, and it uses a system of hierarchy to convince people that it is their job to die when they're told to die and kill when they're told to kill.
Yep.
And that's a dehumanizing experience for everyone.
Yeah, it really is.
That said, what the military is doing to people in other countries is even worse than what the system does to people in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we focus too much on issues like the mental health of veterans, we're not looking deeply enough at the policy that is giving them those mental health issues.
Yep. And it starts from the top.
Hey, guys.
Exactly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you hear me before while you guys were talking?
No, it's your microphone preempting other people talking again.
Oh, damn it. So, no, part of the reason, too, is because I was looking up an article about Aaron. And so basically, so his history is that he comes from a place in Cape Cod. There is a small religious cult called the Community of Jesus. And he grew up within this cult and then decided to leave it and then joined the military. And he was becoming more and more, disillusioned with his progress through the military. I believe he was there for a few years. And then he started getting interested with the Party for Socialist Liberation and some other anarchist groups, and beginning to protest there. So his education on protest may have been through these channels as well. So I wanted to provide that context.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I definitely also have a couple of things that I like to read, but if my mic cuts out, I don't know if I frickin' can. So if you give me 1 second, maybe I'll make this work. But I didn't. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut. If you wanted to keep on about something, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm actually interested in what you want to read now.
Okay.
No pressure, Bess. You got me intrigued.
Oh my god, I have to read. Okay, I just have to pull it up on my tablet now. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to read was a piece from The Guardian that a friend of his wrote that talks about reinforces what you were saying about how there are a lot of people in the military who become disillusioned, and there are groups that can facilitate you leaving the you leaving the military as a conscientious objector. So hold on, let me pull that up. Guardian. And then the other article I want to quote from is from my friend Sam, who is an excellent writer and journalist at Left Voice, and wrote a really excellent piece about this incident. And I love his message, and I wanna repeat that. But give me 1 second. Let's see. Is it this one?
Well, Bess is getting that. I just want to remind people, again, we are collecting signatures. If you're interested in volunteering, virtual or in person, feel free to reach out through KhalilForSenate.com. And that would be it. We're almost with the Green 13. We almost have a full 12 congressional candidates. I think we're down one, and then the world will get to be introduced to everybody.
Cool. Yes, thank you for saying.
It does sound good.
Ugh, this is an act. I'm so myself right now because I have it on the phone that I'm on. You know what? Can I try to? Can I leave and then try to join from the other?
Of course.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll work. All right. I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're
no problem.
All right, hold on.
really interested in what she's got to say.
Well, the guy whose work she wants to read is a good writer, and I've read the piece, so it should be good.
Send me the piece afterwards so I can read it. Maybe I did read it, but make sure I read it. Send it to me. Do we have any questions in the audience?
It looks like. So I should probably talk a little more. I was getting ready to wrap up though, so I don't want to do my final thoughts yet though.
Okay.
I do think it's important to just reiterate that there was a protest in Bushnell's support in Southern California by veterans who were burning their uniforms and basically saying he was right to do what he did. And they wished that they had felt brave enough to do it. And I do think it is making a difference, and that's why you're seeing so much in the liberal media about him being mentally ill, because they're worried about the impact that it's having.
Yep. And anybody with common sense and a brain can tell that the campaign's going good so far. So we're just working on signatures, and volunteers that are interested in collecting signatures because I'm trying to do twice a month with all my other responsibilities, but also trying to get volunteers and individuals that feel comfortable with collecting signatures on their own. And we're trying to work, and I'm talking to some people because I want to do incentives and also try and make this fun where we're getting the community involved and stuff like that. Because because people are volunteering, so I don't want to say like, oh, just volunteer. I want to also be like, oh, the top 5 people, or different incentives to give away to say thank you to individuals.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Someone gave me an idea to do like dinner with Jill Stein and May. And I'm just like, okay, that's if we could get Jill Stein. Let's see. That's a good incentive.
Will she wear a mask?
Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. So the article in The Guardian is called Aaron Bushnell Was My Friend. May He Never Be Forgotten by Levi Pierpont. And yeah, I just wanted to quote a little bit of it. Aaron is by no means the only United States military member who has felt complicit in the military's violence, powerless to change anything, and stuck waiting till the end of a 4 or 6 year contract. There are thousands of military members similarly distraught, having thoughts of taking extreme actions to escape something that feels inescapable. I got out of the Air Force as a conscientious objector in 2023 after going through the exhaustive process for over a year. I applied to be separated because I came to realize I did not support what the military was doing, and I didn't support its goals, and I didn't want to earn my livelihood from something I believed was wrong. So yeah, and then it goes on to say, if you're a service member, I want you to know that you have options. You do not have to be complicit in genocide.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you do not have to be complicit. You can stand up for what you believe in. If you're having thoughts of killing yourself, reach out to chaplains or an anonymous hotline for help. You matter. I need you to stay alive. Don't forget Aaron. Let his death inspire you to live with your whole being, committed to the cause of justice for oppressed people. If you are a praying person, please pray for Aaron's family. Rest in peace, Aaron. I thought that was nice. And then let me also read you just a little excerpt from my friend's piece. You can find Sam's piece in Left Voice. Did I pull it up? I gave you the link, right, Chris, in the DM?
Let me see.
I'm sorry.
I
just want to go have lunch. You don't have it?
I don't have an immediate DM. I have the older DM you sent. Oh, that's the one.
Yeah, the older one.
Here, let me get this sent to you.
Thank you. I'll start reading this. I assume there are other Aaron Bushnells still in the military, people who are questioning its violence at this moment when the brutality of U.S. imperialism is being live streamed to the entire world. I hope they find some of the many anti-war veterans who have been amplifying resources available for people to leave the military immediately. I hope they leave before they lose hope or end up having their minds and bodies destroyed, or dead like the 3 troops killed in Jordan, or poisoned like the 600,000 U.S. troops exposed to forever chemicals, or sexually assaulted like 53 women and 45 men in the military are on any given day. The U.S. military is an evil institution, and I hope people leave it. More than any of that, I hope kids stop joining the military in the first place. I hope we can build a type of class consciousness in the United States that keeps kids from joining the military, that makes it impossible for them to deny that it's an institution only fit for committed reactionaries, only in existence to destroy workers and oppress communities on behalf of capitalists. I hope we can use this moment of genocide in Palestine to keep other kids like Aaron from joining the military. Before Aaron, a woman in Atlanta lit herself on fire trying to stop the genocide. We don't even know her name. Yes, and we don't know her name. As Aaron sought to remind us all, it's become normal under capitalism for people to be lit on fire, though usually it's not their choice, but the war machine turning their skin to ash, twisting mouths that once smiled into screams of agony. I'm terrified that someone I know will be next to choose this. Almost everyone I know who's been rallying for Palestine in the past 5 months is so full of despair, at a loss for what more they can do. I don't want their flesh burning, not even out of commitment to ending genocide. I do not believe there needs to be another Aaron Bushnell, not for this movement or for any other fight against oppression, injustice, and the rottenness of capitalism and terror of imperialism. I hope we can all let ourselves feel the rage and sadness that motivated his protest, but I hope we can channel it into collective struggle, the likes of which we really haven't even seen emerge from this movement yet, but which is not off the table. I hope Aaron's protest inspires none of us fighting for a free Palestine to subject our flesh to fire, but inspires all of us to double down on building a massive movement, bringing new people into the streets, and organizing our workplaces to shut it down for Palestine. I hope his protest inspires the type of movement that could have kept him from despair, the type of revolutionary movement that can actually succeed at freeing Palestine and do it as part of a larger fight to end the whole system of imperialism, which creates the conditions where it's normal for people to burn. I hope we see no more Aaron Bushnells. I hope he's the last person to self-immolate, and that we all take our rage and grieve at his death to create a world where kids can smile so full of life, absent any institutions for killing, no genocide, and no despair. So I thought that was a really powerful message. And did you share the link in the chat?
Oh, I sent it to you. Let me put it in the chat too.
Wow, that was really nice.
Yeah.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, he's an excellent writer.
Yeah.
He is a very good writer.
He's Sam in the Can on
There
Twitter.
It is. I put his link, his Twitter link to the article.
There we go. Okay, yeah, and he's at Samuel Carlin on Left Voice. Excellent writer, and highly recommend. Everybody at Left Voice is very dedicated to the cause, and they are all extreme professionals. They cover a lot of leftist protests across the world, so I highly recommend them. I've been following them for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that's probably a good place to leave it as far as the topic. My only real final thoughts is that please, if you like the show, like and share the YouTube link, like and share the Twitter stream, come to the Patreon, become a patron if you want to keep the show going. Unlike Jimmy Dore and the Young Turks and the other quote-unquote competition out there, there are no corporate sponsors on this show. There is no big communism giving me money to keep going. I need patrons if I want to not work for free, and I would really appreciate your support. I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can without any paywalls because I'm committed to this model of letting people see my content. But I really need someone to pay for my work to be able to keep working. And that's just what I want people to consider.
Yeah.
I hope everybody has a great week. I hope things go well this week for you. I hope you think about some of the things we've talked about today. And until next Sunday, which, by the way, Bess will be returning as co-host next Sunday. And our guest will be Joseph Kishore, the aforementioned only candidate running for president who is wearing an N95 mask while gathering campaign signatures. So I'm looking forward to that. And until next Sunday, we'll tweet at you.
Yes. Have a good day, everyone. Bye. Thank you.